Okay, this is the second game between Stuff and Dully. This is a closed game, but we can still comment closed. Stuff is first turn. The rules are all normal rules, no same wall, but that is probably not relevant. This did come up closed. First turn, of course, does tend to favor closed. When I was keeping track of closed trade results and just went through thousands of games looking for every closed trade game that was on level 9 or 10, my count was I ended up counting about 300 closed games, having skimmed through a couple thousand games. 300 closed trade games. I got basically for every set of 100 I looked at, it was very close to exactly this. 50 wins for first turn, 25 ties, 25 wins for second turn. So if you count a tie as half for each, then first turn is expected to score 62.5%, and second turn 37.5% in closed combo. If, however, you exclude ties, then first turn wins about twice as frequently as second turn wins. So, fairly significant advantage. We see a starter in 5. Obviously, 5 starters are much more common in closed than open. This being something of a side-to-side card, and what we've seen of Stuff's previous hand making, it seems like he really often chooses 4 corners, as many opposites as possible among the power cards, and then 1 vertical or horizontal. Last game it was the 1-5-5-6. This game it is the 7-8-3-8. One advantage if you're going to run a hand like that of playing this card first is it means Deli gets information slower because he has not yet seen any of the opposite pairs, which I think there is a decent chance will be in Stuff's hand. Let's check what the stips are just to get a better sense. But as soon as we see Stuff play his second card, we should have a decent guess as to what his third is, depending on the stips. I like to meet center starters with corners. If Deli were to play a side, I guarantee you it will be in 2, 4, or 6, not in 8. Gonna look so foolish when he plays in 8. The one square I'll rule out. But strong players tend to, if they play sides against center starters, they tend to either match or slide. Slide meaning playing a lower number than 5. So if, for instance, Deli has combo potential in 2 or 6, he may slide in 4, thinking if this ever gets flipped, I have potential to combo back. But there is also a case, of course, for matching, which is to say I am making sure there is no combo chain here. And that can be a very good, less committal way to play. And you see it fairly frequently as well. Most hands will have more ways to slide than they will to match. Like if you think, how many things in Deli's hand can slide in 4? Well, 2 or 3 of his cards are going to have something less than an 8 to the right. Probably like 3 of the 5 cards. Around 3 are able to slide in 4. How many cards in his hand have exactly an 8 to the right? It could be 0, could be 1, could be 2. But it's like a majority of your hand is likely able to slide in a given square, and a minority of your hand is likely able to match. So even if you prefer matching moves in general, if you have a slight preference for matching moves, because you have more sliding moves available, you will see strong players who prefer matching slide more often just because that's how ratios work. Okay, the rules are max of 2 9/9s, no 9/8 corners, must use 2 cards without 9s, no rares. So, okay, what we've been seeing is people running 2 8-7-6-5s and then possibly 2 9/9s, but possibly other stuff. I can actually bring up what we've seen. So, Turds, for example, ran 2 9/9s, 2 8-7-6-5s, and an 8-3-8-7, very similar to Stuff's 7-8-3-8. Smokes went with more 8-8-7 type stuff, but he also ran 2 9/9s. Seto ran 2 9/9s and 3 8-7-6-5s. That's probably the default. DJ did the same thing. Good tournament hand maker. Tezuka went with the 2 9/9s and 2 8-7-6-5s and an 8-8-7. So it seems the standard here is if you're Deli, you expect stuff's remaining cards to be 299s and 28765s. I don't know that that gives you a lot of useful information, but just a thought. Okay. Gonna respond to some messages. Okay. Okay, Deli plays a corner. Now, we have a lot less information about Deli's hand in general because, one, every hand basically is including 28765s, 2 to 3 8765s. This does not tell us whether it's 2 or 3. It does maybe tell us, because it is technically a horizontal vertical, that Deli's likely to have 4 corners left, but really nothing about those corners. And Deli, it seems, builds much less symmetrical type hands. So thinking of a good word to insult Deli with. So in general, I've talked about this before. In closed, you tend to go in 2, 3, and 6 in these positions. And I think which one you go depends somewhat on which squares you're happy about. So stuff almost certainly has some play in 8, right? He's going to have probably multiple cards with a double capture in 8, at least one card. Probably not serious combo potential, but there are like 9-5, 2-9s about. So actually, that's a card seems very likely to be in Stuff's hand, because I think you can run 9-5-2-9 and 2-5-9-9. That seems like cards you might well pick here. Though a lot of people have preferred 9-9-4-3s, but given his starter, maybe we move him towards the other one. Point is, 8 is a square he's likely to have play in. If there's a square that's bad for him, it's probably 4, but it's pretty unlikely, because if you're running multiple 8-7-6-5s, which I bet he is, at least one of them is going to play well in 4. But let's say you didn't have play in 4. You just had absolutely terrible play in 4. You really don't want to be the one to play in 4. You want to play in 8, have them play in 4 in whichever order. Then you could do something kind of like what Deli did last game. Because last game, there was play in 1 and 5, and Deli didn't have cards in 1 and 5. Deli doesn't have 2, so he needs stuff to not go in 4. So where does he go? He goes 8, so that if stuff goes 4, he has play in 7, that he can lock in a bunch of cards from 7. So here, if you don't have 4, that means you don't want your opponent to go in 8. So going in 6 makes some sense, because 6 dissuades 8. On the other hand, if you have both squares, I think you should most likely go in 3 and set up the slash and just try to set up as much stuff as you can. So if you have squares, you set up more squares. If you don't have squares, you play against the squares you struggle with and organize the game appropriately. Okay, Stuff has played 9-9-3-4. This makes it very likely, I think, is 3-4-9-9 a card? 4-3-9-9 is definitely a card. I'm not sure about 3-4-9-9. Like, I think 4-3-9-9's Ifrit. Hopefully I'm not wrong on this. I don't remember what the URL of Turds' lookup cards is, so they don't have a quick way to do it. One thing I'd noticed, though, is if you're running a lot of 8-7-6-5s here, there are a bunch of 3 gaps. In 2, there's a 7 versus a 4, and in 8, there's a 6 versus a 3. So if you have 8, 7, 6, 5, that could land in 8. If you have 7, 8, 5, 6, that could land in 2. It's easy to have 4. It's harder to have 6, but something like 7, 6, 5, 8 or 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not sure which of these cards actually exist. Those all give you some play in 6. But it is to say 4 is the best square here because it's the one most likely to line things up well. Incidentally, one thing I like from Stuff's move, this is, I think, kind of standard weak corner theory, which is if your first turn you want the most easy things to take because you're going to have last turn and you want to be able to flip lots of stuff. So it makes more sense for first turn to play weak corners, see every person's play except Seto, whose play completely destroys all my theories, but we'll just pretend that didn't happen. Because Seto is incredibly effective playing weak corners on second turn. And this is not to say weak corners have no value on second turn, but from a kind of straightforward theoretical perspective, they need some justification to be doing stuff. Well, on first turn, they seem pretty clearly beneficial. But the other thing this does is 9934 was basically a dead card on the board. There were 2 cards on board. It had a grand total of 1 thing it could flip, and it was a 3. With 6 numbers facing out. This was a really poor card. And this can often be the case with weak corners, is if you are playing a weak corner, then what's often happening is there were cards in the other end of the board, and it has no play facing towards those cards and makes sense to get out of your hand. So I always like moves like this. If you don't have 4 or 6, then I probably wouldn't play like this, but if you do, this seems to me basically just clearly correct. Now, if I'm Deli, I am playing in 1 of 2, 4, 6, or 8. I am not playing in 8 because I cannot slide there. I think 4 is the most valuable square. I'm almost certainly playing in 2 if I'm Deli. If I have anything that goes in 2, I'm probably playing 2. Because 2 is a square you can slide, meaning you can be weak to 5, and it is a square that will not be met by 4, so you leave your best combo square open. I'm also, for Deli's sake, hoping he has 8. It probably gets 1 of 6 or 8 occupied, but it's a lot. Even though you set up 8, it's probably easier to have 6. And what's more, even if you don't have 6, you can slide 6. So if you slide 2, they go 6. They go 8. You can then slide 6 and combo everything back from 4. And that's a very typical way of playing. So I like going 4. Oh, Ifrit's 4993. I thought it was 4399. My bad. So I liked 2 more, but this is a very similar concept. This is I am sliding. Now the thing about this is, if Deli doesn't have 8, then I do not like this as much. Now I don't know his cards. It's possible they just don't line up in other ways, but you kind of need to have 8 now. But Deli has played 4993. What's the opposite corner to that? 9. I'm pretty sure 9529 exists, so it is very possible to have 8. He could have 8, 7, 6, 5. There's no reason he wouldn't have that in his hand. He could have 9, 5, 2, 9. There's no reason he wouldn't have that in his hand. Both are plausible hands. It's very possible he has 8. And if he has 9, 5, 2, 9, it makes sense that he'd leave 2 open, because that's another square he has better than expected play in. And it is now kind of unlikely that Stuff has 9, 5, 2, 9 as well, because while I'm now assuming both of them are running opposite 9/9s, I'm more confident that Stuff is. So what do you play if you're Stuff? 2 and 4 are the standard squares, going for the Q or the Z. It's also legal to play in 9. No one will send you to prison. And it is legal to play in 1. If you have the combos everywhere, you can go 1. If you have it all on 1 card. If, like, you have a card that's just the perfect card for 2, 4, or 8, or could be the perfect card for all of 2, 4, and 8 with just a little help, then you can sequence going 1 and 9 with your next 2 moves and keep your final card for whichever 2 remain out of 2, 4, and 8. because if you go in 1 and 9 on your next two moves, they will only be able to get rid of one of 2, 4, or 8, and you can keep the others open. So if you have that dream card that you think just sweeps the game here, then that can be a reasonable way to play. You really wish your opponent had flipped 5 because that guarantees it, because you're still going to need 5 to flip, but it gets more and more likely as you force your opponent, because you will force your opponent to have played in 2 of 2 and 4, so they'll have needed to avoid it flipping it twice. So that's the like combo oriented way to play. The more standard way is to just block 2 or 4. I'm gonna assume stuff is cards like 5, 6, 7, 8 or something. And that's a little scary to put in 2 because things can get comboed through, but it's safe to 5, which limits some of the possible damage. I tend to prefer going for the Q rather than the Z, but your mileage may vary. So if I'm stuck, I am checking for potential sequencing of 1 and 9 that I think might have a chance to be winning. But I think Deli might be able to block 2 and 4 in a way that doesn't flip 5, and then it's not clear what you get. But I think that's interesting. I think that's a plausible way of playing. More likely, just going in 2 or 4. If you have nice side-to-side 8-7-6-5s, just sticking your other 9-9 and 4 and saying, I can combo so much of what I see, can be really valuable, and that is what we see. That is what we see. Okay, so this is part of the reason why I didn't like Deli's move in 6. Because we are very unlikely to be able to slide in 8. And we want to slide in 8, have them go 9, and then combo back from 2. We can't really do it as well the other way. You can still try it, but it's clumsier. If you slide in 2, they go 1, and then you combo in 8, well, they're almost certainly at least going to be able to flip 6 and 3 from 9. I'm just with 2 8-7-6-5s, you're very likely to have that covered, and that's going to flip at least 2 cards back, which may not be enough, but first turn will have the card in 1. So even if you combo everything from 8, that combo doesn't flip 1. They're going to get 6 and 9. They're going to have the card 3 and 6. They're going to have the card 9. I guess that's only 4 cards. I guess they need to flip extra to tie or win. So maybe you go 2, and maybe this works out. But I like the other orientation more, where you don't. Because if Deli doesn't have 8 here, it's really bad. Is it that bad? If you don't have 8, can you just go 9? So I like to sequence these positions by playing one side and then comboing back from the other side. But you can also start in a corner. So Deli could start in 9, if he has 2. And because it's hard to combo that 3, the remaining cards are not going to have 9s on them most likely, and if they do, it's like 9-7-7-1s is the only thing allowed by the stiff, which is not going to flip a 3. So comboing through 5 from 2 is going to, flip 4 and flip 7, and those probably don't flip back. So maybe you can just go 9 here. If stuff goes 1, that can be kind of scary, because, well, if you can go 2 and flip 1 without flipping 5, you're golden. So that can be very scary for stuff to play as well. I don't know. With what my guess about Deli's hand would be, I'd probably go 9. Like, if he has, say, 9, 3, 4, 9, I'd probably play that in 9, because I think... Well, no, because Deli set up 8 but not 2. I keep assuming Deli's more likely to have 2 than 8. But he set up 8, and if you go in 6 on move 4, which Deli did, that is saying leave 8 open. So I don't really think he has 8, but I also don't understand. I wouldn't. He must have 8, right? So if you have 8, you don't go 9. If you don't have 8, I would start 9. If you have 8, I'd probably start 2. Yeah, Ifrit, not a very useful card on this board, though. So even if Deli didn't have clean stuff in other squares, it could make sense to go Ifrit 6 anyway. So I just don't know what assumptions I should be making. I mean, second turn closed in a formation is always going to be scary. I don't know the cards. It is hard for me to judge exactly how scary. I would not start in 1. I'd be very surprised if we saw a move in 1. And unless you can miraculously slide in 8, I wouldn't go in 8. So I think we'll see 2 or 9. But everyone plays quite differently in closed. But I think you're either trying to get 2 then 8 or 9 then 2, depending which is your, like, kill square. If you don't have either of 2 or 8, stuff's scary. Okay, so we see 2. This card makes sense in Deli's hand. It was his plus for 4. He keeps slide potential. It's very important it's strong to 3. So if you're comboed 9 through 6, you're okay. Yeah, so Deli must have 8, which is good, because I think if he didn't have 8, I really don't like how he played this. Now, what cards have we seen from Deli? 9529 is somewhat less plausible. Now my best guess at Deli's hand is 2 8-7-6-5s facing 9-9 corners. That, like, in Stuff's hand, we can see he did the opposite 9-9 corners. He really likes these opposite symmetrical corners. I think his last 2 cards are incredibly likely to be a pair of 8-7-6-5s. Not guaranteed, but, you know, it could be a pair of 8-7-8s or 8-8-7s or something, but, like, it's very likely to be a pair of 8-7-6-5s. Which could be a problem for Deli, because one of the cards I might put him on here is 8-7-6-5 himself for 8. But if he plays that, how many 8-7-6-5s hit that? Like 6-5-7-8, is that a card that exists? I'm not sure if that would hit it. 5-6-8-7, I don't think that exists. There's a bunch of stuff that might hit it. Either the 8 and 5 plus walling or a 7-5 or 6-8 plussing. Could hit that hard. Alright. Deli did not have 8. He doesn't have 9-5-2-9. Yeah, he didn't have 8. I guess he probably didn't have good slides. So either the hand was just really difficult, or I don't like the move of Ifrit in 6. Though this is not to say like you lose second turn closed, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. And you can lose second turn closed with a final board like this, where it's like, feels like, what were you doing? You were relying on a 3 at the end, but that could easily be the best option. It seems like the Z was just really bad for Deli, and he didn't have any play in 2 or 8. So where did Deli have play? Well, we know he had 8-5-6-7, so we know he had play in 4 and 6. Which means I think he had to go in 2 or 8 on that turn 4. I mean, losing doesn't mean there was a mistake, but I think there was a mistake here. Because I think Deli had some combo play, and he's a little unlucky that when he played 6, 4 was blocked. But if you play 2 or 8, you know you're getting rid of a square that's bad for you. If you play 4 or 6, you could suddenly lose both squares that are good for you. So maybe, I mean, it's kind of a weird move, but maybe you just go like 9-3-4-9 and 2. It doesn't even flip 3, but it gets rid of a square you don't have combo play, and it leaves open the ones you do. And 4 is probably your best square. I don't know. It's tough because you don't really want to go 8 because you can't slide an 8. Yeah. Yeah, I like how Stuff played this. I think keeping the 8-7-6-5s as sweepers, as I said, Stuff is very likely one of his 8 7 6 5. Yeah, I mean, this is what we said from the start about Stuff's hand, right? It's very likely to be these opposite pairs, and for each of the four corners. And this all checks out. And it makes sense with his starter in 5, because both his 8 7 6 5s have a plus wall. One of them can maybe play off the 7. Yeah, this is all extremely logical from Stuff in a way that I think can be a little risky to do in this format, just because you don't want your hand read in a closed game. And like, I never had any, I had a general grasp. I had a much more vaguer grasp of what was in Deli's hand. On the other hand, with the slash line, I think the cards in a 3, 5, and 7. I'm not sure exactly what Deli should have done, but I think it's really hard to. I think I don't like 6. Again, I might be just totally wrong about everything. I don't know the 5th card in Deli's hand, and it's hard to visualize stuff in closed. But I think this is one of those spots of like, it's really tough to play a 4 corner or an X position where you play in one of 1 or 9 and they play in the other, because with 8 7 6 5s remaining, like your 9 9s are going to be taken. You don't, and it's hard to play next to your 9 9s. It's really hard to play them as corners in these kind of structures on second turn. So I think like you don't have those choices. You kind of have to play in 2 4 6 or 8, and so you want to optimize keeping the better cards while getting and keeping the better squares. And so I feel like you have to leave 4 and 6 for later. One other thought on this rule set while we're here is I think you can't play 9 9 corners as 9 9 corners, because they're just so comboable. And because you have to have a bunch of cards, and almost every player to play this set, I think every player maybe, has used 3 cards without a 9 on them. Once you've played a 9 9 corner, you can't play next to it because you're just going to be comboed to hell. It's just horrible. So you can't play it as a 9 9 corner. So I wonder if we saw more on this rule set, if we should be looking for half strong corners. So like, Stuff plays in 5, and Deli plays like Ifrit 3, 4 9 9 3 3. Which is not like an amazing setup, so I'm not saying this is a good move, but the point is you now can play next to either side of it because the 3 is low, and even though the 9 is high, the 3 is unlikely to be comboed. And so you have much more ability to play next to it. Or if they combo through the 9, they're not comboing anything extra because the 3 isn't strong to whatever's next to it. I wonder if these 9 9s should be treated either the way Stuff did, but Stuff was first turn, so it's easier to do this, as weak corners, or as sort of half strong corners, like, can my opponent take this? Maybe I made a challenge, but if I didn't, I am not risking anything beyond this. Because we really didn't like see any use for the 9 9s this game as 9 9s. Stuff used one as a weak corner and one as a basically just weak that just got a card out of the way and left him with side to side sweepers. And Deli put 1 and 6, which I think found some use, but it was actually a big problem for him because 6 was not a square he wanted removed, but it was kind of the only square that one of his 9 9s could go on that seemed to do anything. And his other one had a double capture, but a very, as we see, problematic one. So the 9 9s really played badly, which means maybe there's a case that you should just be running 5 8 7 6 5s, that 9 9s are just a weakness. But even if that's not true, I think this sort of implies that the traditional strength of 9 9s is not how they're going to play here. All right, curious close game. I don't know if my thoughts are at all accurate, but there's my thinking on this one. It always sucks to lose second turn closed. And again, just because I think there was a move that was probably wrong, though again, looking at his remaining cards, like his other cards, presumably another 8 7 6 5, which is not a very good sliding card. The 9-9s are much better at sliding. He didn't have great places to put his 9-9s. 9-3-4-9 did not have a place to slide except for 2. 4-9-9-3 did not have a place to slide except for 6. It really clunky to find use for them. And so I'm not sure I have a better move here. All right, we'll stop there.